That electric car is the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, and it's got fake engine noises, exhaust burble, and fake gear changes? The thing I don't understand is, what problems does this car solve? I mean, an electric car that makes fake engine noises? What's the point? Well, we'll get to that. First, let's talk price and range, and one of these brand new will set you back $130,000, so no small amount of change. For that, you get 448 Ks out of a charge, which is not amazing, but there's got to be something else to this car because the internet's going nuts about this thing, so let's take it for a drive. But first, let's talk motor power. And this car being a performance car, it has two electric motors as you would expect. Total power output is 448 kilowatts peak with 740 torquing Isaacs. But with the push of a button, this big red one for a start, that's called NGB or N-Grin Boost, which does sound like a Dutch Explorer. By pushing that button, you get an extra 30 kilowatts of power and an extra 30 Isaac Newtons. That gives it a 0 to 100 time, supposedly, of 3.3 seconds with its electric motors, topping out with a red line of 21,000 RPM. Eat that, combustion cars. As for a battery, it has an 84 kilowatt hour battery pack strapped to the underside, which gives it 484 Ks per charge. And you might be wondering why, because that's not a heck of a lot in 2024. And well, we'll look at that a little closer in a sec. But right now, let us talk exterior design. And at first glance, you might think this is just a regular Ioniq 5 with some stick-on plastic bits. And well, you're not too far off the truth. It is the same Ioniq 5 underneath, but it's still a radical looking car with or without the plastic bits. And the Ioniq 5 is one of those cars that somehow left the design studio and made it in production without being watered down like American coffee. You know what it's like. Some cars, they look great in the concepts, but the finished product is, well, yeah. As for the stick-on bits, there's no secret this car's got a lot of them. Look at the size of that rear bumper. It means it's actually about 10 centimeters longer than the regular Ioniq 5. Not only that, it's also got things like this air dam at the front, which they can close or open depending on how much efficiency you want, how much range you want to get on the track. Now this car's a little bit wider than the regular Ioniq 5. It's 50 millimeters wider, and that's mostly just due to stick-on bits that you can see. Of course, this car also sits a little bit lower. They've managed to squeeze 2 centimeters of ride height out of the car to slam it down. Gives it a more aggressive stance, according to Hyundai. I'll let you be the judge of that. It's also available in a reasonable selection of colors. There's a few, it's not too wild, not too crazy, but I do really like the sort of powder blue matte effect, although I was told by the Hyundai guy not to take this thing through a car wash because it will scuff that paint job, and that means you've got to wash it by hand. But let's face it, if you've got a car you love, you're not going to take it through a mechanical car wash anyway. But no matter which version you go with, they all come with this Go Fast Racing red stripe, so passers-by will know that you spent the extra money to go with the fancy version, the one with all the toys on it. However, all things considered, I'm not yet convinced that all those plastic stick-on bits and that visual modifications have improved the look of the car, because the original Ioniq 5 still looked fantastic. That's for you to decide. It's had a lot of work done. Is it better? Not sure. It's kind of like the resto mod work that's been done on Jimmy Carr's face. But for the interior styling, where I'm sitting, well, it's striking, isn't it? Look how busy it is. That's a big contrast to the original Ioniq 5. Huge difference. Look at all the buttons, especially the steering wheel. It's got more buttons on it than a Victorian dress. It's a massive difference to the car interiors of ones like the Tesla Model Y, for example, and that is drastically lacking in buttons. But at least this, well, this still has an indicator stalk, plus the indicator stalk's on the correct side. Speaking of indicators, which for any BMW drivers watching, they signal your intention of which direction you want to go, which happens with a flick of a switch, and they're free to use. There's a handy tip for you. Better living, everyone. But when you do turn them on, it shows on the display your blind spot on the left or right hand side of the car, which is really handy because if you look in the rear pillars, they are thick. You lose a lot of vision trying to look in the mirror, so these are handy when you're changing lane. Also on the subject of interiors are these notable racing-inspired seats. They're not real like racing bucket seats, but they're pretty close. They've got very strong lateral support, which does lock you into your seat, but at the same time, it's not restrictive like a racing seat. You can still get out of it. It's not like being stuck to automotive flypaper. These are still functional, racing-inspired seats. One other neat little interior detail is these racing-inspired pedals. And speaking as a former boy racer wannabe from the 1990s, don't hate me, I know for a fact that putting stick-on racing pedals in a car increases your horsepower by 50. Let's move on to comfort though, and it's still a relatively comfortable car. The ride is notably firmer than the original Ioniq 5, but it's not uncomfortable. It's now about the same as the Tesla Model 3, for example, so still perfectly usable as a day-to-day driver. As for the seats I mentioned, they're very comfortable. One comfort-related thing I don't like, however, is the fact that Hyundai have removed the movable center console from the original Ioniq 5. I loved that! It gave you so much more room. However, in this one, they put a fixed center console. Now, they've done that on purpose to make it feel like you're part of the car, much in the same way you do when you're driving like a Polestar 2 with that high dashboard surrounding you. But this, I'm not sure I like it. As for interior space, as the driver, well, I got loads of room. I'm 5'10", standard issue human male, but I've got heaps of room above my head, and if I put the seats back, which are manually adjusted, all of them, gone are the luxurious electronically adjustable seats, but you've still got heaps of room. I can barely touch the pedals if I put the seat all the way back. Same goes for the back. Look at all the room back there. Heaps of legroom, heaps of headroom, although footroom is a little snug with these racing themed seats. You can't really stick your feet under the seats anymore. Also, when you go into the boot, still got a large amount of space back there, just passes the Mafia test, just. However, with the seats down, you can lie down fully in this car. That's handy for camping, and if you go up to the front looking for the fartment or front compartment, sorry, there's nothing there. Look at that. It looks like they've made the inverter so tall that there's no longer any storage space in there. That, negative points for that, Hyundai. Another comfort-related feature, which has been taken away from us on this racing version of the Ioniq 5N, is the lower leg support. I used to love that. And I'm sure, none of us ever used it because it's about as useful as a carpeted kitchen, but it is one thing you're gonna have to learn to live without. Bottom line is, you lose a couple of comfort points, but you still get a lot. On that note, let's move on to gadgets, and it's still got all the stuff you want. It's still got appalling CarPlay and androgynous auto, and best of all, finally, it's wireless. They took their time. Speaking of which, it's also got wireless phone charging. That's handy. Put your phone in there and it starts charging by itself wirelessly. Very cool. Just like the original Ioniq 5 though, you keep the two horizontal displays, which are touchscreen, at least that one is, and it's got all the information you could possibly want. The menu system in this is also really logical, no learning required. It's also got its own map built in if you don't want to use Apple or Android, plus it's got its own voice commands, which doesn't work when I press the button. That would have looked good on camera. It's also got the 8-speaker Bose system that comes with the car for great audio, plus it has a heat pump, which is great on days like this, which start off colder than airline cutlery. But let's face it, you're not watching this video to find out how many USB points it has, which it has quite a few, or how wide the back seat is to see how many child seats you can fit in there. You can fit 2 in there, by the way. The fact is, you're watching this because you want to see it make stupid noises and go around corners fast, to reaffirm your prejudices, because in your mind you already suspect this car's either going to be absolutely stupid and pointless, or you're hoping it's going to be just as awesome as you think it might be. So without further delay, let's get out of the restrictions of Auckland City, find some empty country roads, and have a little bit of fun. And welcome to the middle of nowhere. Yep, I'm on an empty slice of road in the countryside. Now I'm going to test the 0 to 100 time, but before I do that, let me give you like a 40-second crash course on what all of these little functions do in the menu. Let's start with the top left, N torque distribution. All that does is adjust the level of the electronic limited slip diff between the front and the back. Next is N pedal, and that is the regen braking, but it's regen braking for racetracks. It helps distribute the load when you enter a corner pretty hard between the front and the back of the car. Next is the N race, and that optimizes the battery for either sprint racing, such as on a drag strip, or endurance racing, such as doing laps. It turns on things like the air vents and the battery chilling, that sort of thing. Next is the N drift optimizer, and that supposedly lets you drift this car like a pro. You just aim the car in the right direction and it does all the drifting for you. It takes all the guesswork out of it. And if you're a driftologist, that is a person who can actually drift a car, first off, hats off to you, that's a real art. Next, is this just cheating? How would you feel if someone rocked up in a car that did all the hard work and showed you up, all those years of training, and someone can just rock up in one of these? Obviously, I'm not on a racetrack, so obviously I can't test that. This is a public road and I'm going to be sensible, but I would like to try that in the future. That sounds like fun. On the rest of the menu, we've got N torque distribution. You can select between the front and the rear, circuit, lap timer, logical, but if we swipe to the right, no, this is not Tinder. This gives you the self-explanatory options that you can adjust individually for your individual N settings. So you can create profiles for your car, adjusting the motor or perhaps the heads-up display or the electronic stability control. That's all logical. Same goes for N launch control, which I will turn on in a sec. However, let's move over to the steering wheel. And well, we've got obvious stuff like drive mode. We've got normal, eco, sport. I'm going to put it into sport mode, obviously. Then we have on the right-hand side, NGB, the Dutch Explorer. Engine Boost is coming back. Yep, that gives you 10 seconds of full acceleration, full craziness, full pleasure, but It only lasts 10 seconds. Next is these circular buttons down here on the steering wheel. They don't actually turn or anything, they're just buttons in the middle. On the left-hand side, press that. That selects your N Sport profiles. Then on the right-hand side, this is where it gets fun. Press that, and it turns on the piece of resistance. Hear that? That is fake engine noise, and you can actually rev it by pressing the accelerator. That is absolutely pointless, but I'd like to see what it's like on the open road. To complement it though, what these are normally regen braking paddles. However, in N Sport mode, well, they turn into gear shifter paddles. It gives you the simulation of an 8-speed Tiptronic gearbox in a combustion car. But I don't know how believable it is. I mean, it sounds kind of like racing games on the Sega Master System 2. And that's showing my age. Launch controls on. Let us turn engine boost on. Press the brake and the accelerator. Let's see how long it takes to get to 100. 3, 2, 1. Crikey. Far out. That was silly. And that was in one gear. It's got a rev counter and everything. This is so... Oh, we're in automatic mode now. So it's got an automatic mode. It's just changing gear by itself. Does it kick down when I slow down? Yep, look at that. This is stupid. It can feel it changing gear. It gives you a little jolt when you change gear in automatic mode as well. This is silly, I love it. Oh, it's got the kick down and everything. Oh, this is so stupid, and it's guilt-free. It's like you've got all the noise, all the rumble, the feeling, the sensation, but without all the pollution. And this car right now, I should point out, is running on clean, renewable electricity as well. You can't lose. That's because this car is running on Ecotricity electricity. Yes, Ecotricity is New Zealand's only certified climate positive electricity provider, which means you can do this without a single gram of carbon emissions. This is stupid. Sign up at ecotricity.co.nz. You've got to join up. If you like the planet, if you want to give your kids a future, you have to join Ecotricity. Oh, this is silly. I love it. Oh, I feel like I'm playing PlayStation. It even starts flashing red when it's time to change gear, as you don't overload the engine. Oh, it's got a little crackle and pop from the exhaust as well, and it's on the back speakers. But don't worry. Oh, don't worry if you're scared people will think you're an idiot from outside. There's no noise on the outside. It's all guilt-free. It's utterly mad, and I freaking love it. Oh, I can feel the kick when the gear changes. This is stupid. If you're just watching this on the screen, on your tablet or on your computer or whatever, you're going to be thinking, that's silly, it's pointless. Try it before you judge it. I was the same. When I picked the car up, I thought, what is the point? But now, ooh, there's some good torque in that engine. Well, it's not an engine, but it feels like there's an engine. Oh man, this is the most fun you can have without putting any emissions into the air. Oh, and the best thing is, no one watching knows I'm having this much fun. They just think I'm slowing down and speeding up. They don't know that I'm pretending to drive a dirty car, but it's clean! I mean, this thing has more grunt than that first generation Dodge Viper with an 8-litre V10 engine, but with this, there's no belts and pulleys and spark plugs and exhaust repairs and gas bills and oil changes and filters, and all that stuff is gone, because this is emission-free. This is guilt-free pleasure. This is wicked. Oh, I love this thing. The thing is, all those gimmicks thrown aside, this is still a really great handling vehicle. I mean, it's got that 3-meter long wheelbase. It is a heavy beast though, but it's got really fat tires. Look at the size of those 21-inch tires, 21-inch wheels. It's a massive thing, 20mm wider tires than the standard Ioniq 5. And of course, with that hardened suspension and the torque vectoring. Plus, you've got big brakes, which, oh, stops brilliantly. Even in the damp, man. Absolutely stupid. I love this thing. I love this thing. But all that said and done, once you've finished being an absolute hoon, it just takes a couple of buttons for you to turn this back into normal mode, turn the N craziness off, and all of a sudden, you've got yourself a comfortable family car again. In a way, this car's kind of like a politician. It'll always tell you what you want to hear. If you want to drive crazily, it'll do it. If you want to just relax on your journey home and put on some Sade, which for some reason involves drinking brandy while driving, don't do that. Or perhaps you're feeling like you want to drive in a Pantera mood, chuck it into crazy mode. Whoa, I felt the front wheels lose traction there. This is mad. I like this a lot more than I thought I would. I don't know what that says about me, but I like this a lot more than I thought I would. And on that note, let's do the Spudscore. Starting with performance, and you saw it, this thing is vicious, 10 out of 10 spuds. Handling's also brilliant, a rare 10 spuds once again. As for comfort, it's surprisingly good when you switch it to civilized mode, but it's still a bit firm, so 6 spuds there. Efficiency is not amazing though, its bigger battery and the performance upgrades means it's 100 kilos heavier than the heaviest Ioniq 5, plus it consumes 2 kilowatt hours more per 100 Ks, so it gets 4 out of 10 spuds there. It does well with gadgetry though, it's got everything you need including vehicle to load and onboard mains power, but having everything manually adjusted loses 1 point. Value's next, and it's not cheap, but if you buy one of these instead of a V12 Bentley Mulliner Bacala, you'll not only get to 100 Ks quicker, but you'll also save about $3 million, so there you go, I just saved you heaps of cash. I should be a life coach. As for charging speed, it's higher than the divorce rate of my socks. I use one of the hundreds of ChargeNet rapid chargers installed around New Zealand, going from 10% to 80%, and it reached 220 kilowatts and sat there for ages until a car started charging next to me and we had to share the charger, which dropped the speed down, so it ended up taking 30 minutes, but the car itself can charge it up to 350 kilowatts peak, which means in the right conditions it can charge to 80% in 18 minutes. That's a charging speed that was unheard of just a few years ago, so a well-earned 10 spuds there. Or if you charge at home like 85% of Kiwis do, then a 7 kilowatt charger like this is ideal, especially if you have a pile of barely mobile British junk constantly getting in the way like I do, because this charger has a 5-meter long cable. It'll fill up the car overnight every night, and even though I'm biased because it's mine, I reckon this Evnex E2 charger is still the best home charger you can get today. They're made right here in New Zealand and it's loaded with smart stuff, and if you're an Ecotricity customer, you can use the promo code ECO100 to get $100 off one of these right now. I'll chuck the details down below. Style's next, and while it's obviously subjective, I reckon the car looks alright, but the original Ioniq 5 is still just as good looking, so I don't think all these plastic stick-on bits really help much visually, so 7 spuds there. But is it fit for purpose? Well, it's pretty average as a family car, but in the corners or as a track car, it's brilliant. By pushing 2 buttons, it switches from deathly quiet to death metal. Once you've driven it, you'll see just how much engineering's gone into making it feel identical to a high-performance combustion car. It's like nothing I've ever experienced, a real combo of disbelief and joy, so I've got to give it 10 out of 10 potatoes for letting me feel 18 again. I only ask you watching this to please drive it before you slam it online. Don't be like me, poo-pooing it before I tried it. It truly is a joyous machine. But the make or break metric is of course PSC, and the normal Ioniq 5 with its big center console and its pull-out glove box holds an impressive 65 spuds, so I expected this N model to hold fewer because of its more compact looking storage, but I was mistaken. The engineers at Hyundai have somehow increased the PSC by 24.6% to hold no fewer than 81 tubers. It's an impressive feat of tuber engineering, so 10 spuds there, what a car. This brings the total spud score of the Ioniq 5N to 80, and that is an exceptional score. And that's the guts of the Ioniq 5N, an electric car with fake engine noises and fake gear changes, and I admit, before I drove it, I was wondering who on earth have they made this car for? Is it for EV haters who are never going to buy an electric car anyway because they're too busy eating crayons? Or is it for electric car people who grew up with PlayStations and Sega Master Systems who just want to have a bit of fun? And I think it's the latter. The thing is, fundamentally, this car is pointless. It doesn't solve a problem. And yet on a sensory level, on an emotional level, it's fun. It's really good fun. Don't judge it till you've driven it. It's harmless fun. It's pointless, but I freaking love it.